Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is IAIN Angus, Councillor at Large with the City Council of Thunder Bay. Welcome, Ian.
Glad to be here, Steve. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, let's talk about your early days. Are you a Thunder Bay boy, bred and born, or?
Born and bred here, raised Chippewa Park. My parents ran the tourist camp from 1945 through to 1969, and that's where I grew up. In the summertime, I'd have new friends every day, and then once Labor Day hit, I wouldn't have any friends at the park until next June, except for the Banning family that were half a mile down the road. So it was a mix of an overload of people and very isolated existence.
Well, this is why I love doing the show, because I learn something every time, and now I know why you've got that commitment to Chippewa Park. I didn't realize that.
It was my neighborhood. It's where I grew up, and my heart's there. So got to make sure we keep that park and bring it back to the glory that it once was.
And so taking off on that, in a way, as you express really where we grow up, what our neighborhood is, can have really a lasting impact on us. And I really wondered, how can we in Thunder Bay promote kind of that identity to the neighborhood, the pride within their neighborhood, to strengthen the connections in the neighborhood? My sense is that makes it a stronger neighborhood and a stronger city. Is that something that kind of gets dealt with at City Council?
Not really, and I'm glad you raised it, because that's an extremely important aspect of city living. And at one point in time, neighborhoods were very cohesive. Everybody knew everybody else. I'm lucky. I live on a small street in Northwood, and when we moved in, one of the first things that happened, there was a neighborhood block party, and we got to meet everybody, and that happens annually. So there's a cohesiveness there, but a lot of neighborhoods don't have that. And I think we need to find a way to instill that. And it may be just some minor tweaks in terms of the rules about closing off streets or what have you, but encouraging people to get to know their neighbors better. And it's easy when there's young kids on the street. Mm-hmm. They make friends, they introduce their parents to each other, and those parents become friends. But when it's an older neighborhood, we tend to be a little bit more isolated. We stay indoors, we hire somebody to shovel the snow, cut the grass, that kind of thing. So it's more difficult for us to engage each other. And yet we've got facilities like the 55 Plus Center, where people from across the city and beyond our borders come together on a daily basis for all sorts of recreation activities and social activities. So that's a very useful tool. And quite frankly, that's why Council decided to reinvest this year in the activities of 55 plus the South Senior Center, which operates at West Thunder Community Center, because we recognize that there were gaps that administration had proposed some cuts, and we accepted it a year ago, recognized that was wrong, so we put that money back.
Well, it's interesting, because after my little bout in provincial politics in 2011, I worked in one neighborhood in the Picton-Windsor area to try to build some of that capacity. And some of the first things we did were, a barbecue and a get-together in the neighborhood, a cleanup, and road hockey, and a number of activities. Yep. A couple of things happened as a result. One, the crime rate fell by 35% in the first year. There was no intention to deal with the issue of crime, but because people were kind of knew each other and were more cohesive, it seemed to have an impact. And we also looked at what was happening in other communities, and we brought in a fellow actually from Seattle, where they started working on strengthening neighborhoods. And they've now developed in Seattle a department of neighborhoods with a staff person and a little fund where neighborhoods can say, okay, we're going to do that block party. Can we get $500, and close off the streets? And And so I thought, geez, that's kind of something that would be interesting in Thunder Bay to kind of think about. How do we strengthen not just that neighborhood, but any neighborhood?
Right.
Opportunities for the neighbors to get to know each other, and all those interactions help individuals, young meet old, and all kinds of things. But I think it strengthens our own belief that we're in this together.
Yeah. One of the first full-time jobs I had with the City of Thunder Bay, and I worked for the Recreation Department, but I was one of 2 individuals hired as a neighborhood organizer. I was assigned to Northwood. A fellow by the name of Andy Hewitt was assigned to Grandview. And our job was to work with those neighborhoods, those communities, to help them achieve their goals. In my case, in Northwood's case, they had a lot of empty lots that were designated parks, but no grass, let alone anything else. And we worked collectively, neighborhood by neighborhood, to build those parks because they saw that as an important addition to their neighborhood that made life a lot easier. We also fought against a bridge being constructed over the Neebeen River, which I ironically use daily now. Some things do change. So I think in the Windsor Blucher, that was strictly volunteer-led, wasn't it?
Yes.
You didn't have any staff to do it.
No.
But can you imagine what you can do if there were staff
Yep.
to assist you? And you know, we look at the Evergreen United Neighborhood, where Linda Bruins is the staff person there, and the incredible work that, with minimal resources, that she has been able to accomplish in that neighborhood. Much better than anything I was able to do when I opened up Ogden Community School on behalf of the Recreation Department, in terms of reaching out to the community and getting them involved and what have you. So those are a couple of examples of whether it's volunteer-led or staff-led in terms of neighborhood organizers that really, really work well. And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons why we added additional funds, $7,500 to Evergreen for their programs this year. And we added $20,000 to the Boys and Girls Club right across the street from the Windsor projects because of the work that they do, not just in that neighborhood, but in a number of neighborhoods throughout the community that are much more efficient than what we can do as a city.
Now, a friend of mine is retired from Parks and Rec, and he mentioned that within his career, he had seen the number of like summer playground supervisors go from over 100 down to like 15. And I go, this is along the same lines, like how do you facilitate activity and participation in neighborhoods? How do we make those kind of decisions at City Council?
Yeah. Well, two things. The fellow you're talking about mentioned 100 playground leaders. At one point in time, and we just celebrated the 100th year of playgrounds in Thunder Bay. At one point in time, there were 100 playgrounds spread throughout the city. Now, it's also at a time when there were a lot more children. So I can understand why there would be reductions, but recreation and parks have been the poor cousin of both administration and of council over the years. Initially, parks would delay projects in order to ensure that there was funds for playgrounds and day camp and the after-school programs. But they reached the point where that wasn't enough, so they began to cut back on the number of playground locations. They became half-day locations
We're
as
going
opposed to full days.
to have to take a little break here, Ian. We're going
Okay.
to come right back to this and find out more about how our playgrounds have evolved. Please come back. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Ian Angus, the Councillor at Large with the City of Thunder Bay. Welcome back, Ian.
Thanks, Steve.
So in the last segment, we were talking about the decisions at City Council and the slow challenges of maintaining the budgets for recreation and parks. How has that been over, like how many years, and where are we at now?
It's been over many, many decades, in fact. And the ironical situation is that those programs are easy to cut because there's nobody to fight for them. You compare that to organized sports, where you try to close an arena, and all hell will break loose. You have a dome that collapses that eliminates soccer programs, and you got a scrambling, and we now have a proposal for a permanent indoor soccer facility. They're organized. Mums and pops in neighborhoods tend not to be organized, and when it's sort of whittled down, like, okay, once it was 5 days a week, then it was 4, then it was every second half day. Over time, you just get used to it, and you make do elsewhere. So I know that I'm accused of being a big spender. I saw, when I got on council, I saw my job in a lot of ways was to counterbalance those who wanted to cut those kind of programs. And so I'm constantly arguing for more money for those programs, knowing that I won't necessarily get it, but maybe I'll protect them so that they're not cut anymore. Because that's part of the quality of life that makes this city so great to live in. And I'll give you an example. The City of Toronto is in the running for a major high-tech facility.
Right.
Did they market paved streets and few potholes? No. They marketed the quality of life, their parks, the tree coverage, the cultural facilities, all of those things that make people want to move to a community. They might complain about the potholes once they get there, but in terms of attracting it, that's a key element. And we've got to start remembering that, and we've got to start ensuring that we maintain our parks properly, that we maintain our recreation centers properly, that we have the programming that our children and our adults and our seniors need to enjoy life here. That will keep them here. You know, we talk about how do we keep our young people from leaving? Well, if we focus on those things that they want to do, then there's a better chance that we'll retain them, provided also that we have the jobs that they want.
Well, I want to connect together the two things we've talked about, which is in a way recreation and sports and neighborhood development. You know, and how the two influence each other, as you said.
Yeah.
Like oftentimes the neighborhoods aren't organized to then put that political pressure on the decision makers. Is there a way we can try to create a little bit more balance there so that we strengthen that voice of the neighborhoods to be able to have, because it seems to me what we hear, you know, in terms of safety is the issue of young people who are rowdy or creating trouble or violence. Where if they don't have any activities to do, if they don't learn how to play together, which we oftentimes learn in the playground and in sports teams, those are all skills that make us good citizens.
Yeah. And in addition, not only learning how to play together, but learning that we aren't any different, regardless of our color, regardless of our religion, regardless of where we first grew up before we moved to Thunder Bay. And a lot of people are not born here.
Half our population, I'd speculate.
Yeah, they come from away.
Like me.
Yeah, and away might only be 20 miles down the road, but when you compare the small communities to the big ones, it's a different world. So I think, you know, whether it's playgrounds or outdoor hockey rinks or outdoor basketball courts, a place for kids to gather, to let off steam, to enjoy life, and as you say, to learn how to be together, to work together, and plus some projects that they can work on. But to do that, you need some resources. We know that if you look at service clubs, you look at other organizations, they're aging. The younger folks, the middle age, and the young folks are not as engaged as they were in your and my time. They're struggling. They're struggling to make ends meet, and in some cases, they're struggling to keep up with their kids in terms of hockey and soccer and dance and bowling and all of those organized things that they do, and they're just driving one stop, you know, one place after another. So we have to recognize that, and so the only solution is we provide some staff that can help to organize these neighborhoods beyond the staff that we provide to support the community centers, which are important hubs in this community that provide a lot of recreation using volunteers. as well as the revenue they get from paid admission to activities. But they're very important. So we need to look at that. We need to find a way in which we can support those neighborhoods to help build up their capacity to do stuff. The kind of stuff that they want to do, and the kind of stuff that will make it a better neighborhood and a better community.
And so that kind of brings us to the budget. So you've just approved the budget for 2018,
Yep.
2019, I guess it is. That was it.
Yeah, no, actually just for 2018.
Just for 2018,
Yeah.
it's on the calendar year.
Yeah.
How are we doing in terms of getting that balance right? There's a lot of demands on our municipal government. How are we doing there?
Well, in terms of how we're doing, we're not doing very well. Council collectively made a decision to, in effect, raid our reserves to keep the tax rate down. I mean, I understand people don't like paying taxes. I don't like paying taxes, whether it's federal or provincial or municipal or sales tax or paying fees. But that's the cost of providing government. Interesting stat, only 4% of people's income goes towards the payment of property taxes. And another way to look at it, somewhere around 9 or 10 cents of every tax dollar goes to the municipal order of government. Yet we're the most visible. We're not, and I say this as somebody who's done this, we're not running off to Toronto or Ottawa every Monday morning and not coming back till Friday, and not being visible to the community. We're here all the time. And so, people talk to us in the grocery store, in the beer store, in a restaurant, you name it. We're there, we're visible. So we're under much more pressure to respond to the needs and demands of the taxpayers. But our job is to balance. You hear a lot of talk about, we need to fix our roads. We're not spending enough money on roads. Well, that's true, we're not. But we're also not spending enough money in our parks, our recreation facilities, our other amenities that we have. We have a deficit there, as well as in the roads and the pipes under the ground, what have you. Council's job is to try and find that balance. And up until now, I don't think we've done a good job. That we've tended to concentrate more on the so-called hard services, the roads, the bridges, and we have not, and we've been concentrating on that and ignoring the so-called soft services, our parks, our play fields, our recreation facilities. So we need to find a better balance. So in answer to your question, no, I don't think we've got it right yet. And we know that because we dipped into reserves for this year to make it easier for people to go back to the electorate to say, look at the good job I did.
It's an election year.
It's an election year.
You know what? We're going to hang on right there.
Okay.
And we'll come back and talk a little bit about democracy. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is IAIN Angus, Councillor at Large for the City of Thunder Bay. Now, Ian, we're talking about balancing the different demands. We also have our three orders of government, our federal, our provincial, our municipal. And we've seen over, the decades really downloading from the federal to the provincial to the municipal. And as you say, here you are on really the municipal level. You're more accessible to the people. What you get paid is like, 20% of what the other orders of government are getting
maybe a little bit more, but
hardly anything
yeah,
compared to what
yeah.
the work you're doing. You've also been elected at all three of those different orders of government. Yeah. Now, so you've got kind of a bigger picture, a bigger history. Where do we need to go in the future so that we're able to provide better services to our populations, to our citizens?
Thank you for asking that question and the way you asked it, because a long-held belief of mine is that the days where property is a basis of ability to pay are long past. Way back when, people who own property had a lot of money. Yep. We've got how many seniors in this community who have lived in their house for 60 years, who are house rich, but hardly have a nickel to scrape together. One of the options available is to begin to, well, I guess we've seen some uploading. Ontario Works is now 100% uploaded.
Right.
ODSP is 100% uploaded. What's not uploaded is social housing, and we're the only jurisdiction in Canada that where the province and income tax does not pay for the operating costs of social housing, and that's being borne by the property taxpayer. We either need to shift more of the cost of municipalities onto the federal or provincial government, or we need to get a specific share of the income tax. So if you've got that 2 or 3%, and I'm making that up, I don't know what the figure should be, that as people's incomes grows, we get a share of that. And that there's a cutoff point. You know, the low income cutoff point, say below that you don't pay any income tax toward the municipality. I'd be okay with that.
Well, and even our tax system already has a certain cutoff point
That's
to
right.
begin with.
That's right, yeah. So municipalities need a different source of revenue. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario floated a proposal a couple of months ago, actually no, sorry, last August, that said we give us, I think it was 2 cents additional sales tax to help fund the municipalities. Premier, the leaders of the other two parties said a flat no. I mean, go figure, they're coming up to their own election. They're not going to promise to increase the sales tax. What they do after the election, time will tell. But it was a way for AMO to say, we need new revenue sources. And we've tried. Actually, even old revenue sources. There's a thing called the heads and beds tax. So every college, university, and hospital, instead of paying property taxes, pays a flat fee per bed to the municipality. And the money comes from the province. That hasn't changed in 30 years. So that needs to go up. The railways are taxed, property taxes based on the acreage. In every other province, they're taxed on a per ton mile. And with the amount of freight going through this community, that would be a significant windfall for us in terms of revenue. It really would not hurt the railroads. And it wouldn't cost the province a cent, but it would make it much easier for us to pay for the services, both existing and any expansions. The other trouble we have is with MPAC, who's been allowing, through their process, companies like Resolute to reduce the amount of space they're taxed on. And now the big box stores are also appealing, and we end up having to pay millions of dollars back to them when they win these cases. And it's just causing no end of grief, because at the end of the day, more costs are placed on the residential property owner. Reductions in industrial, reductions in commercial. It's only the residential ones who are left to pick up the tab. And
Well, now, the way Impact is going to reduce the value of the big, like Resolute and the big box stores, seems to also reflect how our whole tax structure has gone. I mean, when we were young, seems like people and corporations paid like a 50-50 share to the federal government. Now it looks like for every dollar that the corporation puts in, we put in $3.5. So am I wrong here? Or is this?
no, I don't think you're wrong, but looking at it from a municipal point of view, we don't have many sources of revenue.
Yeah.
And the main one is property taxes. The second one is fees, and it's all the same ratepayer that has to contribute to the operation. So, what is the fair distribution between non-residential and residential? But we also know that because of that tax structure, any new home that's built on a new street that's built, even though that stuff is paid for by the homeowner, the ongoing operating cost, the taxes on that street do not pay for the cost of maintaining that street and providing police and fire and recreation and all that. So there is cross subsidy involved, But that's the balance that we have decided upon as a society, that industrial and commercial and multi-residential shall have one type of share. Single-family dwellings will have another type of share.
Right. And from my perspective with workers' compensation, back 100 years ago, Sir William Meredith said, well, the corporations should pay because they have the ability to pass it on, where individuals don't have that opportunity.
That's a very good point.
It's part of that business model. Yeah. So Ian, we're just coming down to the end of the show. If people want to get in touch with you and explore some of these issues further, what's the best way to do that?
Best way is email. I'm hardly ever at my phone, but emails I get all the time. So iangus@thunderbay.ca is the best way to get in touch with me. If it's a concern about something that's happening with the city, that's even better, because I can just flip it over to administration, get the actual reply, which I think was what people want, and I can respond back to them, and it makes it much easier for everybody. Plus, they get a record. It's not what he said, but it's what he wrote.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Once again, please check out our Facebook page, Community Conversations. We enjoy your feedback and ideas. Thanks so much, and stay safe.